and I help businesses to present better by creating branded templates for them, creating slide decks for them, but most importantly, training them how to use PowerPoint better so that they can create their own great content. Okay. I think somebody in the waiting room, so I'm just going to see if they're, oh yeah, they're just joining there. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we will start off. Okay, so, oops, one moment, just getting the right setup here. Right, there we go. So what to consider for your pitch deck. So what we're going to cover today is the importance of creating a branded template, what content to include in the pitch deck, the top 4 tips for professional slides, and top 3 things to avoid. So pitch deck is used to provide your audience with a short overview of your business and business plan, and it can be used, sorry, I see one person trying to get in there, so I will just admit them. Oops, that's gone forward while I clicked them to let them in. Let's just go back. Okay, so it can be used for onto face-to-face online meetings with co-founders, partners, potential investors or customers. So in the Lunch and Learn today, we're going to look at the information to include on your slide deck and also smart ways to display the information on the slides. Okay, so it's going to kind of cover 2 topics. So I will go through the slides and maybe describe what I've done to create a certain slide as well. So you're kind of getting two things here today. So for example, this particular slide, oh, the lights have gone off on me here in the room, obviously not moved enough. I can still see, so hopefully you can see me okay. So for this particular slide, I took a plain image and inserted my text onto that particular image. So this image is just a blank slide, blank content behind the screen, and I put content on that to make that content my own. Okay. So the first thing we were going to cover was the importance of branding. So why is branding important? Well, firstly, it looks professional. And branding really, it refers to deliberate actions you take to influence people's perception of a product or service so that they'll choose your brand time and again. Especially, it is the way your product or service lives in the hearts and minds of your customer. So that's a quote from Wix, from their website, okay? And we've got content here for 7 reasons why branding is important. So to set you apart from the competition, to give your business an identity, to develop brand awareness, to establish brand recognition, build brand trust, establish employee pride, and enhance your business value. So if you're looking for funding from potential investors, for example, you want to make sure that your presentation is branded. One of the reasons why you would want to do that as well is so many presentations online these days, it's very easy for someone to just take a quick snip of your content as well. So that's another thing to be aware of, okay? So this particular slide is smart art, and I've modified that by adding some additional bits to that to change it from the standard smart art. So what to include? Company info, the concept, the problem, the solution, market size, competition, the competitive advantage, the product, traction, business model, financial forecast, other investors, use of funds, who's involved, and call to action. Now, I just want to ask, Nena, are you letting people in the meeting room? Just to double check there that I don't need to do that.
Yeah, I can. I'll admit them as you go along. Yeah, no worries.
That's great. Yeah, great. As I'm clicking on to admit them, I'm going forward on the slide, so I prefer if that's okay. Thanks very much.
No worries.
Okay, so that's what we're going to go through. So first is company info. So you want to make sure that whoever's seeing your presentation knows who you are, where to find you, and where to contact you if they want to follow up with you, okay? Quite often people will have a pitch deck and they will turn it into a PDF and send it around afterwards. So another reason why it's important to have this information there, because people can then just click on a link and go to your information from the PDF, okay? So the next slide we have here is the problem. So you want to have some information on what the problem is. So this is a dummy slide deck, sort of relating to my business, but it's not a real one that I'd be using for a pitch deck. So I've defined my problem as not enough time or the right skill set to create professional looking slides. Okay. So in a dummy survey that I did, 76% of small businesses interviewed didn't have the time to create slides, and 65% of those businesses didn't have the skills to create slides. Okay, so that's my problem. All right, their problem. So use statistics here to show that you've researched the market. Okay, so if you have some figures like this, statistics are really powerful. You'll notice that none of my slides have bullet points on as such, though we might see one later that does. Using visuals like this with the numbers is really, really eye-catching, and it can certainly make a slide a little bit more exciting by having the numbers there very large and maybe some text underneath. Okay. So the next slide we have is solution. So this solution here is about training your team to create slides for themselves. Okay. So what you want to have in here, you want to have a really, really good quality image. Okay. For those of you who are Microsoft 365 subscribers, there are fantastic stock images that you can use. So when you go to the Insert tab and click on Pictures, you'll see stock images. And there were over 8,000 images when they were launched a year ago, and Microsoft are adding to those continually. So do check those out, because they're very, very good quality, and there's some really, really engaging images that you can use there. Now, if it was a product you were selling, you probably want some images of the product, if it's a physical product as opposed to a service, which mine is. So what I'm trying to, I suppose, sell here is the concept of, somebody that's delighted with working on their own slides and have come up with a great presentation, for example. Okay, so that's what you want to evoke in your audience. All right. So I've got a second solution slide here. This one's outsourcing slide creation. So if you need a presentation doing that, you can get me to do that for you. Okay, and again, another striking image there, very colourful, and I think it really gets across the message that somebody else can do that design piece for you. Now, one thing I want to mention on this slide, there's a bit of text here, and the text is a little bit small. So that's done on purpose. The reason why I'm saying that is that this might be something you would send out as a PDF to a potential client afterwards, or a potential investor, or whoever. So, people sort of talk about, oh, you can't have too much text on a slide. It really depends on the context, in my opinion. Okay, so if I was sending this out as a PDF, I'd probably keep that text in. I've kept it in because this is a demonstration today. If I was going to be presenting it, I might remove some of the text out of there and have less text. It depends on the audience. All right, when people say you can't have text on slides, it depends what you're doing with the slides. All right, it's not that straightforward, in my opinion. So move on to the next one. So the next one is market size. And I see quite a lot of these type of images where you would have the circles. So you have the total accessible market. So this is real stats that I got from the CSO. There are 248,344 small, medium enterprises active in Ireland. I think that was in 2001. Okay. And the total accessible market is the total available market. So that's the number of SMEs who are my target market. Okay. The next one there is the serviceable accessible market. So that is the segment of the total addressable market targeted by your products or services. So who is it that you're trying to reach? And the next one then is the serviceable obtainable market. So that's who can you actually, what portion of the market can you actually capture? Okay. Now, one of my tips for this type of slide, I see slides like this a lot, and they're actually not, the size of the shapes isn't in proportion to the numbers. So these shapes are in proportion to the numbers that I've put in there. Okay, so I've worked that out, and I've made sure that the area of those is relevant to the size of the numbers that I've put in. Okay, because I sometimes see these with figures on, and the figures are nowhere near represent the size of the shape. So if you're going to do this, just take a bit of effort to make that look well. Okay. With a slide like this is just made up of 3 circles. Okay, so a PowerPoint tip for this one: when you insert a shape, you can lock the aspect ratio, okay, for the shape, which means it'll stay in a perfect circle, and then you can resize it. So all I've done here is resize the circle a couple of times, change the color, and I've aligned the content. Okay, so there's an align drop-down menu where you can align that to make sure that it looks well. Okay. So this one is the competition. So it's looking at the competition. So there's a couple of different things you can do here. This is a magic quadrant. And this is where you've really got sort of 2 axes to display. Okay. The other option is a grid. So I know not everybody is in favor of the magic quadrant because people sometimes think a grid is better, but it depends how many things you have to compare with your competitors. So these are just dummy things that I made up. And then we can display those on the grid and explain to your potential investors where you sit in comparison with your competitors. Okay. So the next one is competitive advantage. So what is it that makes your company brilliant? So this is your time here to show off. Okay. So this one here is an infographic. So we've got 5 different elements to this infographic. So I have listed 5 things that are good about myself and my company. So I deliver customized training, product quality, I'm flexible, premium service, and I offer lunch and learns. So I'm now offering paid lunch and learns to corporates, as well as this lunch and learn today. So again, the text is quite small here, but for an infographic, you know, it's something that's going to be looked at in more detail as a PDF. So that's why I've kept that particular text in there. Okay. And the next slide we've got here then is the product. So this is where you want to put some information about the product that you are selling, be that service or physical product. So examples of my products there: lunch and learns, infographics. I do specialize in infographic training, training on how to create MP4 videos from PowerPoint or with PowerPoint, and branded templates. So you might want to use a mock-up. So that's just an image of my corporate training document PDF that I would send out to corporates when I'm in touch with them. There are some sites you'll find online where you can actually, there's like mock-up sites. So if you Google mock-ups, you'll find that there's some sites where you can actually help you mock up the products as well. So that could be of use to people. This slide here, you'll notice there's a background image. So again, this is one of the images from PowerPoint point of view. One of the images that I've put in here from the stock images, the Microsoft 365 stock images. And all I've done here for this particular image is change the transparency and change the color. So the image itself was quite bright when I put it in, and I changed the transparency to have it more as a background image. Okay, so quite easy to do, and then you can have content on top of that. It's sometimes your slides can look a little bit plain if it's just a white background. Okay, and that can just take the edge off a harsh white background. Okay. So the next slide here is traction. Excuse me, I'm going to have a little sip of water one moment. I'm just going to mute myself while I do that. And the lights came back on. Okay, so this slide is traction. So typically what you'd have here is information that refers to the progress of the startup company and the momentum as it's gaining and as the business is growing. Okay. So for example, here you might have annual revenue, the turnover of the business. I can see a mistake there. I've got a turnover for 1,021. I think that's supposed to be 2 in there, so that's an error on my part there. Customers, the number of customers that you'd have, the growth, and for that one in particular, I put Google search down because I'm on the first page of Google when you search for PowerPoint specialist or PowerPoint trainer. So this slide is very, very easy to create. Basically, you insert a shape. you duplicate the shape, okay? Create the content. So say for the first row for annual revenue, I've created a shape, popped an icon in, put the text in the orange color there, the 100K, put some text underneath, and grouped all those together, aligned them first, grouped them all together, duplicated that, changed the text, okay, and changed the icon. So if you're working with icons and you have an icon in a presentation, what you can do is when you click on the icon, it will open up a graphics tab, a graphics options tab, I think, off the top of my head. And there's a button in there which is change graphic. So it allows you to swap that graphic for another one. Again, Microsoft 365 have a great library of graphics for you to use. And you can swap it and it will be exactly the same size and the same aspect ratio as the other graphic that you've swapped it for. So you don't have to resize it. If we copied something like in this example, you would have to recolor then to have the different color for the next block of information. But that's a really, really handy way to quickly create a slide like this. And you'll see the colored text as well didn't really stand out very well on the pale background. So I added an effect on there. It's like a glow effect, white glow effect, to make the text stand out a bit better. Okay. Now, the next slide is business model. So the business plan really is precisely defines your business, identifies your goals and serves as your company's resume, basically. So what is it that you're doing and what's the context? So for my side, so for the example I've used here, it's PowerPoint training company for the Irish UK SME sector, okay? So the first graphic I've got there is SMEs, and then I've got the UK and Ireland. I've got lunch and learns because that's what I'm focusing on at the moment. Cost for sessions, and I suppose the process is an upfront booking system. Okay. Now this slide again, I've got my background there where I've changed the transparency, and I think I might have made this one put a slight blue tint on it because it was a little bit bright and didn't quite match the branding that you'll see running throughout this particular presentation. If you wanted to create an infographic like this with the circle, this is done with a pie chart. So you can insert a pie chart and then you can put the other information on top of the pie chart, basically. So that's what I've got here, pie chart and shapes. So combining the two there, okay. Some of the graphics here are not the standard graphics in Office 365 or PowerPoint 365. You'll notice the map of the UK and Ireland. That one has come from a separate add-in that I use called the Noun project. If anybody's into icons, there are millions of icons on this particular site. There are free ones and there are paid ones. I have a subscription which costs about €35 a year, but the extra icons that I have here are amazing. So it's worth my while investing in that, okay? Now, so the next one is a financial forecast. So I have just put some dummy information here of the number of lunch and learns that I plan to have or did have, the revenue and the income that I'm gaining from that, okay? That one's fairly self-explanatory, just a table there. And this one is current investors. So I've made up some dummy investors there. The lights have gone off again. So these are icons from the Noun project, actually, that I have recolored and made them sort of look like logos, just more for the benefit of today's presentation rather than actual logos. The next one is the use of funds. So when you get money from your investors, what are you going to do? They're going to want to know what you plan to do with the funds that they're going to hopefully invest in your fantastic company. So this one is a chart. It's a very simple donut chart saying where I expect the money to go. Okay, my imaginary money. So I'm going to get some new hires. I'm going to get some people to help me with presentation design because I need to outsource that now because I'm too busy to do it myself. I want to develop an online training platform. So some of the money is going to go into that and having a customized system so that I can put my courses online. 20% is going to go into marketing those courses. and the design work that my new hires are going to take up, and then say legal, 10% on legal costs. Okay. Now, there aren't specific categories here. It could be anything, you know, depending on what the product or service is that you have. Okay. And the next one here is people. Investors are going to want to know who you have in your business and what it is you are, you know, who it is that's in the business and who it is you need to get into the business. So what we have here is myself here as the founder, and then we've got 3 different positions here that are vacant, and what I've used here is just an icon here to display what we have showing there. Okay. And now we're going to move on to the tips for professional slides here. So 4 tips for professional slides. So the first one is branding and color palette. So there's various tools that you can use to get your color palette working for you. You might have a logo that's already been designed. What I see quite frequently is the logo only has maybe 1 or 2 colors in it. And often, well, in PowerPoint, you need to have 6 colors in your color palette. So what I would see there is people, as I say, only having 1 or 2 colors, and they need to have 6 in PowerPoint. So there is a tool called Adobe Color, and in Adobe Color you can create you can use the color wheel basically to show other colors that would complement the colors you already have in your color palette. Okay, to get the 6 colors that you need in PowerPoint. So in this particular example here, we have this is a standard one from PowerPoint. And I'm actually going to come out of here now, and I'm going to show you this in PowerPoint instead. Let's see, I'm going to share this one. Okay, so hopefully you can see my PowerPoint file now. I'm not going to resume this show. 1 minute. Let's check that we have that right. I just need to stop the show before I do that. Okay, I'll share this one now. Okay. So yeah, color palettes. So you will find the color palette. So I want to show this one because it's quite an important one. So on the design tab, we have under variants here, we have, is that not showing that now? Colors. So these colors here are the standard colors you have in Microsoft. So this is the palette you will probably recognize because you see this quite often, these 2. And there's all these other palettes that are already in PowerPoint. So you can see how easy it is to change the look and feel of a presentation just by choosing a different palette here. And if you want to, you can customize the colors, and this is where you can add your own color palette. Okay. So that was that. I'm going to go. So that's the color palette. So using good quality images. So as I mentioned, we have insert pictures. If you're using 365, you've got stock images. And when you click on stock images here, you have a huge array of images, hundreds of thousands of images that you can use here, okay? And they're really, really good quality. So that's definitely one of my tips would be around using those if possible, okay, if you have access to them. One of the other add-ins I have is Open Pixels over here. And when you click on that one, you have a little sidebar that opens. Where's that gone? Okay, not sure why that's disappeared there. It's not on the animation pane. Let's go back here. Not that add-in has decided to disappear. Anyway, Open Pixels basically shows you all free images that you can use from Unsplash. So if you use Unsplash, you can use Open Pixels or Pixels, and the Open Pixels is the icon, and you can add images directly into your presentation from there, which are free to use rather than going outside of PowerPoint. The third tip is the aspect ratio. So when we have a shape added, let's click on this shape here, and I'm going to go to the Shape Format tab and click on Size. And here we have something called the aspect ratio. And when I lock the aspect ratio, it means that when I change the size of this, it stays in proportion, okay, from the corner. So this is really, really important with photographs to have the aspect ratio locked. Or if you're creating certain types of shapes. So for example, let's just pop a circle in here. So here I've got a circle. If I don't lock the aspect ratio, when I'm trying to resize this, I inevitably end up with an oval instead. So do undo with that. If I lock the aspect ratio, it means that I can resize that and it is going to stay as a perfect circle, okay? It's a really, really important one there. And then the fourth one is alignment. So for example, to put these 4 boxes and the content here in alignment to make it look good, let's just align them so that I can show you this one. What we have here is highlight them all. So I'm pressed Control and then I'm clicking on more here. So under the Align drop-down menu here, we can align them top, and then we can distribute them horizontally. And there we have them nicely aligned, okay? So that is the tips, and then we'll move on to the things to avoid. I'm actually going to stop the share and we'll go back to the presentation now. I'll start that up again. Okay. Just one moment while I share that so you get the best in there. To share. There we go. Okay. So bullets. Generally speaking, I wouldn't put bullets on a slide. I have them on this slide, I know that. In an infographic, it works quite well because sometimes the information on an infographic, the text on an infographic is quite small, and it might not be that easy to read because it might look like it's a paragraph. So in this example, I would use bullets, but I wouldn't just have bullets on a slide on its own, okay? There's lots and lots of different options that you can use as opposed to bullets. If you are using bullets, one nice little tip, if you have depends what size your logo is and if you've got text in your logo, but you can put your logo as a bullet. So that can kind of be a nice way to maybe use bullets by having your logo in there instead of the round bullet. Too much text, I kind of touched on this earlier. If you're presenting to people, I would tend to have less text on the slides and more text in the notes section so that you read it out and use the presenter view. If you're going to be sending something around as a PDF afterwards, then it's much more acceptable to put a lot of text in. So perhaps you have a couple of different slides that you would use in different scenarios, and you can set up a slideshow and choose which slides you want for that particular presentation. Perhaps it's an in-person one and you want less of the wordiness in, and perhaps you send a different presentation round or a different set of slides round as the PDF, okay? So the way I would do that is I would duplicate the slide. So just press Control and D from the outline at the side of the slides, and then I'd either take the text out and then have 2 versions of the slides, one for PDF, one for online, okay? And then the next thing I would try and avoid is fancy animations and transitions, okay? Reason for this is it can be quite distracting when people are viewing online. So I sat through a presentation once where there was a lot of slides and we got to the end of the presentation. Somebody asked a question to go back to the beginning of the presentation, and the person went through all the slides and it was a really fancy transition. And by the time she got back to the beginning of 100 slides, I was almost feeling sick. I couldn't look at the screen anymore. So I would definitely stay away from them. I think just go for something simple, okay? And that's probably the best way to do it. Okay, right, so just bear with me there. Right, okay. So when we touched on the what to include, the last thing was a call to action. And I didn't have a call to action in my dummy pitch deck, so I have one now instead. So my call to action is to check out my training course that is starting on Monday. It's PowerPoint, good to great. It's a weekly course that is running over a number of 5 weeks, 1.5 hours a week. And there's a discount code, 15% discount code, promo code of ROW15, if anybody's interested in checking that out. You'll find more information on my website, imaginecoaching.ie. And I'm going to be really, really greedy, and I have 2 calls to action. My next call to action is to connect with me on LinkedIn, because I share a lot of video tips and tricks, and you'll see those on LinkedIn. So do look me up on LinkedIn and connect with me to see more tips and tricks. So that's the end of the presentation. I can see there are some comments in the chat there, so I'll have a quick look at those. Just opening those up now. Right, so Katie said there, I've got 365, where do I find the image library location? I did actually cover that, so I don't know whether that was before you asked your question or not. Perhaps you could let me know, Katie, and if not, I can go over that again. Oh, I see, yeah, Niall's put that in there. Yeah, and they're great as well. Now, there are some copyright, brilliant, yeah. There are some copyright issues with those. You are okay, providing you're using it in a Microsoft application. Okay, or it's come out of a Microsoft application. So, for example, if you take an image from those stock images in PowerPoint and you save it as an image and use it on your website, that is not allowed. Okay, if you have it in a document and you make that document into a PDF, that is allowed. So just be a little bit careful about what it is that you're using those stock images for. They're really to be kept in Microsoft applications. Okay. So I see Jackie's asked a question there. Can I go through the best practice for adding video to PowerPoint? Yes, I can, Jackie. So what I find when people are adding video, one of the things I see quite a lot when they're adding video, they tend to, if it's online video, so for example, a YouTube channel, they tend to pop that in, and PowerPoint will put it in a sort of reasonably small box in the middle of the slide. So what I tend to do, or what I think people don't realize you can do, is you can drag that out to be the size of the slide. Now, it looks a bit blurry when it starts, because it's got to load up through the internet. But your audience will have a much better view of that video, because they're going to see it full size. So that's what I would do with online videos. For adding, the other option is a file that you have saved, you know, on your OneDrive or what have you. When you add that type of video, depends how you're adding it. Some people might have an introduction slide. So, for example, they might have a title describing what the presentation, or sorry, what the video is that they're going to see. And then they might have the video as a smaller size on that screen before it starts playing. Okay. So what are the options you have for video is that when it starts playing, you can set it to go to full screen. So again, if we're going to bother setting a show, putting a video into slides, we want to make sure our audience can see them rather than having a small video on the screen. So that's the way I would manage that. If I was adding video to a presentation from a file that I have saved elsewhere, I would always set it to play in full screen. Okay. Another option, if you've added a video again from a file and you have it full screen already, so what you can do is set the video so that it plays automatically as soon as you go to that slide. Okay, so that's another setting I would use if you didn't want to talk about the video, or maybe you could have that as a different slide. As soon as you click to go to the next slide, it will automatically start playing, and you can do that as full screen as well. Okay. Any other questions? I'm going to stop the share there. for the moment. So as I say, do connect with me on LinkedIn, because then you'll be able to see various other tips and tricks that I would post quite regularly. And I have themes for the month. And funny enough, the theme for this month is going to be images. So if you're interested in learning more about how to work with images, then do connect with me and you'll see more content there. Okay.
Great, thanks for that, Fiona. So if nobody else has any questions, of course you can always email Fiona afterwards. But thanks for that session. It was really practical and really informative. But yeah, I think that's it. No other questions are coming through. And yeah, perfect. Thanks so much for today, Fiona. It was really great.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for attending.
Thank you.